Now, in Meeting Standard 1.5, which calls for differentiation for teaching, literature suggests the assessment of prior knowledge as a useful strategy. It also calls for use of informal assessment, which will inform teachers of ways to adjust their own practice and then differentiate for varying student needs. So, some ways that I have implemented this in my own practice include the evaluation of a prior lesson and then refining instruction and adjusting the resources that I created to better suit the needs of students with varied language abilities. So, some of the changes that I made included instructions delivered sequentially to ensure that students followed procedure, so actually numbering instructions. Addition of further imagery to scaffold students with varied language ability so they could identify which tools were needed, as well as any further instruction needed to assist students in independently using ICT. So this just included me elaborating a little bit more on what each function did and obviously making instructions longer, but this helped students in being able to better use the tools. So another way that I used this, this lesson plan demonstrates my understanding of differentiation as I have explicitly allocated time within the lesson to assess student needs. So this includes the use of questioning, which I've listed here. Is there anything the group's finding unclear? Raise your hand if you've heard of this idea before. Within table groups, take the next few minutes to think of something that might be a little confusing. So I made sure to include that within my lessons to assess student needs. This was followed by action of grouping students together who were at similar stages of the project. Essentially, this is the practice of planning for students to be at different stages of progression through the unit, which is supported by my supervising teacher's evaluation, where she identifies that I grouped together students, broke down the task, and then gathered students who were struggling together to further assist them. In Meeting Standard 2.5, which calls for literacy and numeracy strategies, I heavily based my practice on the contextualization of learning to draw connections between existing and new knowledge. This helps to develop language skills in building the field or knowledge base for development of further vocabulary. This also links to Vygotsky's ZPD theory and has additionally been shown to be a successful method for teaching numerical concepts. So I have demonstrated my understanding of this standard through the organisation of an excursion to engage students in authentic learning of some otherwise abstract concepts. Activities included students photographing plants and annotating them to connect new learning of terminology to real-life examples, and in doing so demonstrate their understanding of design language. In their annotations, students have been able to identify concepts discussed in class, including key colours, gradient of colour, the feeling or mood that the image portrays, contrast, composition, and elements of existing aesthetic styles. In Meeting Standard 3.2, which calls for planning, structuring, and sequencing learning programs, my research indicated that providing students with temporary supports or scaffolding throughout a unit is effective in building upon students' previous experiences. In structuring lessons for success, materials should connect to previous lessons and build in complexity while gradually releasing the aforementioned temporary supports. In order to plan effectively, I incorporated a prior knowledge assessment into the first lesson in order to adjust planning where relevant and ensure that I was building upon students' previous experiences. This was especially important in the learning context that I was placed in as I was in a senior school where all Year 11 students are new enrolments and have come from a number of different schools with obviously different design curricula. I not only identified students who would benefit from differentiation, but also identified students who would need extension and challenging content due to significant previous experiences. I also asked students to reassess their learning at the completion of the unit to evaluate their learning over the course of the unit. This can also be used as a tool to revise unit plans and make changes accordingly. The unit has been structured based on Derewianka's teaching and learning cycle, which is designed to decrease teacher control and increase student independence over time. The structure of the unit allows for differentiation for students with varying needs and includes many resources designed specifically for this unit.
There are a number of pedagogical approaches used within the unit, including project-based learning, context-based learning, scaffolding of complexity, worked examples, and connective pedagogies.
To meet Standard 4.2, which talks about managing classroom activities, literature suggests that connective instruction is 7 times more likely to engage students and increase prosocial behaviours. Connective instruction, as well as a stable classroom environment, has significant positive effects on the social emotional development of students, as well as their level of academic rigour displayed in class. This leads to a safe and responsible learning environment, which was my main goal here. I initially provided students with worked examples of brands that interested me and had a specific skincare connection, which was the context of our assessment. This established a class discussion regarding the significance of each element within design. Students were then able to investigate and collate images from brands that they use or like or are inspired by to deconstruct their visual language more deeply. This connects to the virtual backpack of information that students already have and bring to class, and also allowed us to use it effectively within the classroom. The student work demonstrates a high level of connectiveness and engagement in the task at hand. Due to this busy and focused classroom environment, students were able to engage in higher order thinking, identifying more abstract design elements like emphasized logos, brand recognition, symbolism, and brand differentiation. In managing classroom activities, I also had to restructure the classroom layout for increased lesson stability. The existing classroom arrangement presented a number of challenges, including clusters of students who were disengaged and off task, as well as those indicated in blue who were isolated from other students. We also were in an open plan area, which meant that students from other classes were able to enter the design room, which interrupted our lesson greatly. So several changes were made to increase students' prosocial behaviours and engage them more seamlessly into a flow state of work. This demonstrates my ability as an educator to assess the existing teaching space and implement effective changes to assist student learning and promote a prosocial, healthy, and safe environment. In meeting standard 5.3, which asks teachers to make consistent and comparable judgments, literature heavily refers to the use of SACE performance standards and meeting ACARA content descriptors. This ensures equality of assessment across South Australia and Australia as a broader community. Moderation is also encouraged to ensure that judgment is consistent, and so colleagues can be consulted during assessment and marking. Using performance standards in collaboration with students to receive input and negotiate assessment criteria and goals individually. I established an interim submission midway through the unit to check student progress and intercept any students who may be disengaged from the project. I created this rubric using the performance standards that was used to collaboratively assess student progress. The students had an opportunity to revisit incomplete sections or get valuable feedback regarding the quality of assessment, but this also gave me a deeper insight into students' achievement levels to help inform their final reports. Together with my supervising teacher, I also read 20-page folios from all students' work and created a spreadsheet to identify the best examples of an A, B, C, and D grade. These became our markers and allowed us to more easily and more accurately identify where other students sat in comparison. This ensured consistent judgment as exceptions were clearly articulated and accounted for when comparing to other students' work. In meeting standard 6.1, which talks about identifying and planning for professional learning needs, literature strongly suggests that it's the teacher who's the key determinant of student engagement, motivation, and progress during their critical development years. It is the quality of teaching that is essential in influencing student outcomes and achievement. Therefore, it's also essential that teachers are reflexive and reflective of their own practices in the classroom. The Australian Professional Standards for Teachers inform the development of teachers' current and developing professional development achievements and future goals. This acts as a platform for teachers to self-reflect and self-assess in a variety of domains, including professional knowledge, professional practice, and professional engagement. This certificate is evidence of my ability to identify professional learning needs and action effective solutions. In this case, I completed a professional development session with colleagues regarding the safe and responsible use of new laser cutting equipment within the design room. As part of our regular feedback sessions, I asked my supervising teacher to assess my lesson using the above lesson observation tool developed by Cheltenham Girls High School. This incorporates the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers. She identified Standard 5 as an area that could be better satisfied in future. However, she did assure me that not all standards could be addressed in every lesson. Despite this, we spoke about not stretching yourself too thin when in lesson and allowing students to take more direction. In the case of Standard 5, I could have implemented a self or peer assessment activity, which will free up time for me to allocate to students who require additional support. In meeting Standard 7.1, which calls for professional ethics and responsibility, I heavily referred to the Code of Ethics for Teachers in South Australia, as it highlights three core values: respect, responsibility, and integrity. The Teachers Registration Board suggests reflecting on teacher practice and acting ethically in decision making, using the Code of Ethics document as a guide. Additionally, the documentation of experiences and reflections using the Code of Ethics will guide the board in reviewing teaching principles, should they be questioned. It is therefore essential that teachers maintain sound records of interactions with students regarding any mandatory reporting requirements. The descriptor states that teachers should also meet the Code of Ethics established by the school and/or school board. This means following the school's individual policies or charters and keeping a copy to refer to as is recommended. In Meeting Standard 7.1, I used the TRB's Code of Ethics for Educators. This code is comprised of three main sections, as mentioned earlier: respect, responsibility, and integrity. And it is my aim as an educator to meet all three of these ethical principles. I demonstrated integrity while on placement by fostering and upholding professional relationships with students and colleagues, and also by being aware of and respectful towards diverse student backgrounds, cultures, abilities, and educational needs. I also demonstrated responsibility by supporting students and nurturing their passion to learn through incorporating their interests and high quality teaching practice into relevant curricula. I also demonstrated respect by upholding a classroom culture of authenticity, acceptance, and individual dignity, and by dressing appropriately and modelling pro social values in front of students. I also met professional ethics and responsibilities while on placement by communicating with the Year 11 Dean regarding student welfare. A particular student detoured from the track during an excursion. I followed school policy and procedure and demonstrated ethical responsibilities by phoning the school front office and informing the Year 11 Dean via email. So the image to the left shows the email that I sent to the Year 11 Dean regarding the student welfare. This is an essential part of mandatory reporting regarding student safety and demonstrates my understanding of duty of care. Here are some references. Thank you for watching. Additionally, in terms of numeracy strategies, students were able to use the images collected to develop their ICT skills. This included their understanding of correct measurement, scale, and visual ratio, which have been modelled throughout a number of prior classes. The image above shows student understanding of these subject relevant concepts at a basic level at the beginning of the unit, compared to the image below, which is the work of the same student at the end of the unit. This shows the student work increasing in complexity and also increasing in their understanding of complex concepts.